Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me. I appreciate your calling attention to the importance of this nation's maritime transportation network. Our historic investments in commercial harbors, inland waterways, and port infrastructure have been critical to the economic health and prosperity of our communities, our states, and our nation. Mr. Chairman, as you know, this committee was successful in moving the Bipartisan Water Resources Development Act before the August break. I am hopeful that with your leadership, we can continue to advance the bill forward before the end of this Congress. The Water Resources Bill shows what this committee can do when it works on a bipartisan basis to address the critical needs of this nation. However, there is another issue pending before Congress that has taken a far different path and has resulted in confusion, uncertainty, strong opposition from states and stakeholders alike. Mr. Chairman, I'm referring to language currently under negotiation in the National Defense Authorization Act that weakens federal, state, local authority to address pollutant discharges from vessels. As you know, vessel pollution legislation falls exclusively within this committee's jurisdiction. In fact, the last bill that this committee formally considered was in the 112th Congress, called the Commercial Vessel Discharges Reform Act. Yet, seemingly out of nowhere, an entirely new vessel pollution bill called the Vessel Incidental Discharge Act, or VIDA, has been added to a non-germane bill in another committee and is now under negotiations in a joint House and Senate conference. Mr. Chairman, as you know, the committee Democrats objected to the inclusion of this never-before-seen proposal in the defense bill. This proposal is radically different from the bill this committee explored over 4 years ago and has drawn opposition from states and stakeholders alike. I would guess that no member on this committee can explain exactly what this legislation would do, who wrote it, or who would benefit from it. As to the best of my knowledge, this proposal has undergone no congressional hearings in the House or the Senate. I know for certain no committee member or staff of the minority party has been part of the process. What is worse is that despite the lack of transparency, the list of states and organizations opposed to this proposal is growing as more entities come to learn of its existence. Over the past few weeks, the House and Senate have received numerous letters from states and organizations expressing concerns with the vessel pollution bill, which I ask for unanimous consent to include in my remarks for the record.
So moved.
These organizations, which include state water pollution control agencies and state environmental agencies, state fish and wildlife agencies, state boating law administrators, all expressed their concern that, quote, VIDA exempts state authorities to protect state waters from harmful, invasive species and water pollution discharge vessels. Further, these state agencies believe that, quote, VIDA will have adverse consequences on water quality, sources of drinking water, and sensitive aquatic resources. Mr. Chairman, over the past few years, we have seen countless examples where drinking water supplies of large and small towns across the U.S. have been compromised by pollution and invasive species. In my district and in the western states, we are plagued with the invasion of a quagga mussel that has clogged water distribution systems, added pollution, and created hundreds of millions of dollars in costs for local water agency and our constituency. Right now, in more communities, we cannot say that the water that is delivered to our homes or our schools or our workplaces is safe to drink. Think about that. Here in the United States, we cannot say with certainty that water we are providing our citizens is always safe to drink. Yet, according to the state's letter, the VIDA will have adverse consequences of water quality and resources and sources of drinking water in the U.S. So then who benefits from this water pollution vessel bill? Will large ocean-going ships? No. Well, I'll just skip a lot of that because we're running out of time. Will this legislation improve the operation of vessels in the armed forces and national security? No, because the discharge requirements for the vessels of the armed forces are unchanged by this legislation. So this legislation puts our precious state resource waters in jeopardy to ensure that a small universe of commercial and fishing boats is no longer regulated under clean water permitting requirements. Mr. Chairman, we have an obligation to understand proposed legislation before It has a potential to become law. Therefore, I'm requesting that this committee undertake a formal legislative hearing on the vessel pollution before further action is taken in the House. I ask unanimous consent that a letter formally requesting this action be added to the record.
So ordered.
In my view, far too little attention has been given to the important topic to jam this untested language through on a non-germane bill with virtually no congressional oversight within the proper committee of jurisdiction. Our water, our local natural resources are far too precious to take action on this proposal without fully understanding its impact. I yield back the balance of my time.
This time I want to welcome our three